Hey everybody, Jason Trofe here. I just wanted to show you something that's been working incredibly well, and it is how to find the right business blueprint in the form of franchising. That's what our family business did for our entire lives. Our father started, me and my brother do this together now as franchise consultants, and we learned it from just growing up around it in our family business where we had 81 franchise locations across the country. And you can see this, we've published this on Forbes. We're a member of the Forbes Communication Council, and I'll show it to you in a second. But basically what I'm going to show you what works really well if you're shopping for franchises. This is how to find the right top-performing franchise. And if you want to do it all by yourself, we've actually published it on Forbes, and you can download it below this video. However, if you want us to do it for you, we're a free service, and I'm going to show you how that works after I show you how to do it yourself. So this is the actual article on Forbes. It's called The Lean Franchising Method. And this is part one of a series of 3. And this one is how to find the right top performing franchise. The next one is to make sure that you can actually be a top performer in that type of franchise network, and make sure that your skill set and your backgrounds aren't fooling you, which is less obvious to most people than you might think it is. Okay, so you can see here, this is me, Jason Trofe, down here as the author of this article. You can see the link below. You can search it on Google, up to you. Okay, so for those interested in owning a franchise, you may wonder what should be considered when analyzing the right opportunity. And you might ask, is it possible to develop a healthy income and even a substantial one using the franchise model? Well, at leanfranchises.com, we've launched and grown 81 franchise locations, and we've gone to great lengths with the help of very experienced attorneys and accountants and financial advisors to develop a method of systematically identifying hot franchise opportunities right in your area. And you might wonder what should be considered when analyzing the right opportunities. Well, we call this the Lean Franchising Method. It's been published on Forbes.com. It includes 10 questions to ask yourself about a potential franchise before you commit. And number 1 is it a high growth industry? And this might sound like an obvious question, but it really is not. So sometimes people get into an industry and they just don't realize it's trending downwards for years, year upon year. Maybe they know a friend or maybe they see it and it seems like a great idea, but it's actually trending downward, and you want to make sure that it's not. So you can do that by using sites like Statista.com, and you can look into the industry. That's a membership site. You have to pay to see all the information, but you can get enough for free to just take a quick look and see if it's a high growth industry or not. And by high growth, I mean, 10% is good, 30% is better, but there's other ones where there's actual emergent growth, and I'll go over that a little bit later, but that is really where you want to be. So number 2 is the brand dominating the industry, right? So if the brand isn't, if the brand is kind of, just existing, do you really want to be part of that? It might be harder than, you might have to work harder than you really want to, right? So if they're dominating the industry, meaning that they've actually discovered a sub niche or they created a niche and they're growing super fast. I'll show you examples of this. So number 3, have they reached saturation? Is the brand on the upswing of a growth curve, which is great, or are they are they not, and all the good locations are pretty much taken? Number 4 is the average revenue of a location 4 times higher than your actual income goals? Or can you afford a multi-location purchase, which is a very common strategy? Buying 3 hair salons is very common versus 1 McDonald's or something, right? So number 5 is the ratio of revenue to investment above average for that particular industry? You want to set a normal minimum here is about 2 to 1, meaning if you invest $1, you make $2 in sales by leveraging the blueprint and the systems and processes that are just delivered to you, handed to you when you purchase the franchise. And that is a pretty basic minimum. Now, sometimes if you're going to spend $1 million, getting a 2 to 1 isn't as important. A 1 to 1 is still $1 million in sales. It's probably pretty good. However, I've seen these go up to 5 to 1. I've seen 8 to 1. I've even seen really astronomically high ones like 40 to 1, and I can show you all those as we move along. But to get going on here, let's go to number 6, which is what is the growth to failure rate? In other words, how many stores are opening and closing per year, right? So number 7 is there pending litigation? We check this for you with our own attorney. If you already got that covered, at least use an attorney and to check for any pending litigation. You don't want to be caught in the middle of something, and they don't necessarily tell you if they're in any lawsuits. And some brands, to point this out to you, let's take a popular brand that you probably all know, like Dunkin' Donuts. I believe there's hundreds, if not over 100, actual pending lawsuits with their own franchisees. I wouldn't advise going into that. I wouldn't do it myself. I wouldn't tell anyone it's a great idea. You can do it if you want to, but I just think that's a very strong sign that the relationship that you're going to have with your support network is bad. So I don't like that. I think checking for that's great. Number 8, does it have a competitive advantage, right? Is there barriers to entry for competitors? And so why you're buying your way into a franchise network is because they offer these things to you, right? There's a barrier to entry for your competitors to look as good as you can look, or to offer an offer as good as the one that you can offer. And that could be patents. They could have proprietary systems. They could have economies of scale. They could have economies of scale where they're buying so much inventory throughout their entire network of franchisees that the discount that you get there is just unparalleled and nobody in your local market can match. And that's great. Or the brand actually is the supplier of whatever it is you're selling, and let's say it's a retail store, and that can't be sold outside of the network, which is great. And that brand, they go and they use, maybe they have hundreds of locations and they have a monstrous marketing budget, and that supports the brand, and there's just no way someone can launch beside you and compete. So that's a great thing to have. Right? So number 9 is do the top quartile, meaning the top 25% earners of highest earning franchise locations, match your chosen locations, demographics, your chosen locations and demographic. Okay. Number 9 is do the top quartile, meaning the top 25% of the franchises in the network, highest earning franchise locations match your chosen location's demographics, or are you willing to relocate for that? That's a kind of important factor, right? So if the top 25% of the earners, let's say, are located in the middle of major metropolitan areas and you're located in sort of a rural area with a much smaller population, and those are more and they're more rural, maybe the demographic, let's say, is 50 years old and plus in your area, and the real top performers are in the middle of New York City, where that's not the median age or the median income. Those things are very important. These are things they're not going to tell you to check that are very important to find out whether or not you're buying a lemon, or you're just going to be one of the bottom performers and you just wish you knew that before you got into it. Number 10 is, while all 10 are important factors to consider in order to become a leader in a franchise marketplace, many of these questions boil down to due diligence in research and understanding your own strengths. Right? Let's take a look at a few major points. Spotting top performing franchise trends. A common misconception is that a popular household brand name is a sure moneymaker, but that's just not the case. The key is in the timing, when the good locations are not yet taken. So good timing is when the industry has not reached saturation, or when a new sub-niche is born, creating an entirely new market. So try to find a good location for something like Jimmy John's or Subway. You just can't do it, right? You can't. If you happen to find one, the real money is actually made in multi-location ownerships of these small, fast casual food franchises. So try to scale. Opening 3 locations in an area with the option to open a dozen more, you can't. So this becomes a bad play. The brand becomes irrelevant. So how do you find out about these brands that will soon be as big as Subway but are not saturated yet and still on an upswing if you haven't heard of them yet? Here are 3 ways to find top performing franchise brands that are not yet saturated but on an upswing of a growth curve and poised to become a top performing brand. Number 1, cross-check growth rates for founders with multiple brands. Well, what does that mean? Well, we cross-checked hundreds of popular franchise brands with Inc. 5000's fastest growing companies to identify high growth industries. Those brands have already figured out how to ride the growth curves in each of their given industries. So if they're already well past this point on that list, chances are, just as in adult dating, the good ones, meaning the locations, are already taken. But I would still recommend checking. More importantly, check to see if those founders have launched additional brands. Those brands will likely be using the same high growth model, leveraging the power of the other brands and the major growth markets. Why? Because they'll be leveraging the power of the other brand and the major growth markets will still be open. This is more common than you might think. If brands are not on that list, meaning they actually must apply to be included, and many just don't, your homework becomes looking through franchise disclosure documents, otherwise known as FDDs. To do this, I use the advice I learned from franchise attorney Nancy Leonard, who we actually recommend our clients to. And she has 30 years of experience in franchising and was counsel to one of the largest franchise brands in the world with over 1,300 locations. The advice was this: do a side-by-side comparison of items 5, 6, 7, 19, and 20 of the FDD. That might sound like a lot of work, but without getting too heady about it, this is simply the costs and the revenue, the profit margins, and how many locations are opening and closing per year. It's just the bare bones, bare minimum, side-by-side comparing that you want to do. And this, she advises, should always be followed by actual validation with live franchisee conversations. Don't just take it on the word of the paper. So I like to say, when a star is born or is burning out, the evidence will show in the FDD. And I'll show you how to find that evidence. This brings us to step 2. 2, identify who's behind the rapid growth and stick with that founder. Many times, founders launch other brands, and unlike the adult dating scene, the hottest ones, meaning the most lucrative locations, are available to be swept off their feet. For example, let's consider a franchise brand that has perfected a business model in boutique fitness, for example. So every time it opens in a new territory, it just takes off, right? It grows fast. After a year, the brand has 500 locations and the major metropolitan areas are saturated. You just can't get in anymore. So while it continues to grow, they also develop niches in parallel services. So in this case, I said we're in boutique fitness. It may have a chain of Pilates franchises, a chain of yoga franchises, a chain of spin classes, or if you're in the home improvement, I've seen very established brands that they'll go air conditioning repair, and then they'll also have electrician, they'll also have a plumber franchise, they'll have window cleaning and property management, and just a slew of other things that just cross-sell. When they open that new brand, the most lucrative locations are open again. So let's say you're just looking for locations and you want to pop it up in Houston, right in the downtown area, and in New York, right downtown, and you want to get into the middle of Los Angeles. Maybe you want to be in the middle of a metropolitan area that's close to you. They're all going to be taken if we're talking about something that's just saturated, like a Subway or a McDonald's, right? But the most lucrative locations, if McDonald's opened a sub niche brand like a healthy fast food joint, that downtown area doesn't compete with McDonald's, so they open them right next door. Right, so the most lucrative locations are now not owned territories, but you have to act fast because when this happens, the franchise network knows it happens. Everybody is aware of it, and they will start snatching up the hot locations, and then they'll do it again and do it again. So the lean franchising method, but the window of opportunity is limited. Right, so I just said that. It's all in the timing. Another trick is to look for major CEOs who leave major brands to start their own brands. And this leads us to the third point. 3, leverage high growth curves. For the purpose of this short video, I'll segment growth into 2 groups. Group 1, industries with 10% to 30% annual growth, like construction, for example. And Group 2, I'll call it the true emergent growth, which is rare. And legal cannabis franchising is an example of true emergent growth. And I'll have an entire series on cannabis business opportunities that is coming soon. That is really exciting. A lot of real high growth opportunities will be available in that niche. Okay, so when this opportunity comes along, it requires intelligent know-how to wrangle the knowledge of others and ride that natural groundswell. Let's consider the Orange Theory fitness franchise. The brand created a new sub-niche, boutique fitness, right? It didn't exist before Orange Theory. In a growth industry, fitness, it's growing. Year over year, it was growing. And so the major industry, the major niche is growing, and they created a successful new sub niche and they dominated it. And they dominated it to build a $1 billion brand with a growth rate of 76% over the past 5 years. Now, it may have reached saturation, sadly. Too late for Orange Theory. If you missed that boat, like I did, you're just kicking yourself. So I got good at looking for the next boat, and that's what I help people do now. So the idea is to ride a wave that has a natural groundswell. Based on my experience, this will always outperform any amount of hard work or quote unquote grinding, as the trendy entrepreneurs like to proudly proclaim. I think that's stupid. Why work 100 hours a week when you don't have to? You need a good blueprint, a good business system, a solid branding strategy, a solid marketing strategy, a lead generation strategy, and something that's consistent over time. And people have figured these things out. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. They have 30 years of experience and hundreds of other locations doing it, and you just hop on board and start making money right out of the gate. So our next video will focus on skill set matching to maximize your natural disposition for financial and happiness gain. Yes, they can be balanced. Without this step, you'll fail. An amazing franchise concept is like a superior fighter jet. If you put the wrong pilot in the cockpit of a fighter jet, it'll crash and burn. So in part 2, we will review how you can locate the top performing franchisees within a given network and match their skill set, background, and demographics to your own to ensure that you're a triple threat. So you can maximize your odds of becoming the new owner of the most lucrative franchise for your unique set of circumstances.